In the autumn of 1885, a young Chinese woman carried a warm apple pie across the lonely Wyoming plains. By sunset, an aging widowed rancher would stand between her family and an angry mob. And before the first snow arrived, one careless joke would change both of their lives forever. This is a fictional dramatization inspired by the history and hardships of the Old West. Some characters and scenes are created for storytelling purposes. Silas Vance sat on his porch.
He watched the dust rise on the trail. He was 60 years old. His hands were mapped with the scars of 40 years of hard labor. He was a widower. He had learned the heavy, suffocating silence of an empty house. His wife, Martha, had been gone for 3 long winters. He had not laughed since the day they buried her, until a young Chinese girl climbed the porch carrying a pie. Since her passing, the ranch felt less like a home. It felt more like a fortress against the world. He watched a figure moving steadily toward his gate. It was Mei Lin. She was 24 years old. She carried herself with a quiet, unbreakable grace. Life had aged her far beyond her years.
Her family had come to Rock Springs for the mines. They worked the coal and the laundry. In 1885, the law said her people did not belong. The Chinese Exclusion Act was a shadow over their lives. Yet she walked with her head high. She wore a silk dress of deep plum. It was embroidered with delicate golden threads. It was a splash of defiant color against the brown plains. In her hands, she carried a tin. The smell of baked apples and cinnamon reached him first. It was the scent of a memory he thought he had lost.
Mei Lin stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. She offered a small, respectful bow. "Good morning, Mr. Vance," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. "My father saw your horses at the market."
He noticed you looked thin and tired. He insisted I bring you this. Silas stood up slowly. His knees creaked like the floorboards of his old barn. He looked at the pie in her hands. It was a perfect lattice crust. It was golden and shining with sugar. "You shouldn't have walked all this way," Silas replied. His voice was gruff from hours of not speaking. "The town is restless lately. The air is thick with a bad kind of energy. It isn't safe for a girl like you to be out here alone." Mei Lin smiled at him. For a moment, the harsh Wyoming sun seemed to soften. "Kindness is never a waste of time, Mr. Vance." She climbed the steps and handed him the tin. Silas took it from her. His rough, calloused fingers brushed against her smooth skin. The heat of the tin warmed his cold palms. He looked at her. He really looked at her for the first time. He saw the sharp intelligence in her eyes. He saw the quiet strength in her narrow shoulders. A sudden, sharp pang of loneliness hit his chest. He thought of his empty kitchen table. He thought of the cold bed and the long, quiet evenings. A strange impulse took hold of his heart. He let out a short, dry laugh. "Mei Lin," he said, shaking his head. "If I were 20 years younger, Miss Mei Lin," he said softly, "I'd be asking your father for permission to court you." He meant it as a joke. He used it to hide the sudden ache in his soul. But the air between them suddenly grew very still.
Mei Lin did not laugh. She did not look away in embarrassment. She looked him straight in the eyes. She had a seriousness that made him catch his breath. "Mr. Vance," she said quietly, "a man is not measured by the years he has lived. He is measured by the way he holds his ground.
He is measured by how he stands when the wind blows." She turned them. She began her long walk back toward the town. Silas stood on the porch until she was a small speck. He went inside and sat at his heavy oak table.
He cut a slice of the warm pie. The filling was sweet and tart. It was the best thing he had tasted in a decade. But as he ate, he could not stop thinking. In those days, ugly rumors traveled faster than trains.
People blamed the Chinese for everything that had gone wrong.
Silas heard it in every saloon and every feed store, and each day the whispers grew louder. Hatred was boiling over in the coal mines of Rock Springs. The white miners were angry.
They blamed the Chinese workers for low wages. They blamed them for their own struggles. Silas heard the talk when he went for supplies. He heard the threats whispered in the dark saloons. He knew that Mei Lin's family was in the center of the storm.
He looked at the empty chair across from him. Martha would have told him to act. She would have told him that silence is a choice. She would have reminded him that dignity has no color.
The next few days were filled with a restless energy. He fixed the fence near the creek with frantic speed. He brushed his horses until their coats shone like glass, but his eyes kept drifting toward the smoke of the town. On the second night, the sky changed. He heard a commotion in the distance. Shouting echoed through the hills like a pack of wolves. He saw a faint orange glow against the clouds.
His heart hammered against his aging ribs. He didn't stop to think about the danger. He saddled his swiftest mare. He rode toward the town as if the devil was chasing him.
The following events include historical descriptions of civil unrest and violence. They are presented for educational and storytelling purposes without graphic detail. As he reached the outskirts, the horror became real. The Rock Springs Massacre had begun. Men were running through the streets with torches. The sound of breaking glass filled the air. Angry roars drowned out the sound of the wind. Silas pushed his horse through the chaos. He reached the small laundry owned by Mei Lin's father. A mob had gathered outside the wooden door. They were throwing stones. They were screaming insults that curdled the blood. Silas saw Mei Lin standing in the doorway. She looked small against the backdrop of the fire.
But she did not look afraid. She held a heavy wooden broom handle in her hands. Her father stood behind her. His face was pale with a terror no man should know.
"Get out of here," a man in the crowd screamed. "This land belongs to us." Silas steered his horse between the mob and the door. Two older ranchers recognized him. Without saying a word, they rode forward and stopped beside him.
No one wanted to be the first man to strike Silas Vance. He was a tall man. In the firelight, he looked like a ghost of the Old West. "That's enough," Silas bellowed.
His voice cracked like a whip over the noise of the riot. The crowd hesitated for a single second. They recognized the old rancher. They knew him as the quiet widower from the hill. "Silas, get out of the way," one of the men shouted. "This isn't your fight, old man." Silas drew himself up to his full, towering height. "Every man's life is my fight if he is my neighbor," Silas said. His voice was steady now. It was as heavy as the earth itself. "These people have done nothing but work. They have minded their own business and lived with honor. If you want to get to them, you'll have to go through me." He didn't have a gun. He only had his presence. He had the weight of a life lived with integrity. The men muttered among themselves. The fury of a mob is a fragile thing. It needs a target that won't fight back. Silas Vance was not that target. He stood like an ancient oak in a storm. Slowly, one by one, the men began to drift away. The immediate danger had passed, but the air was still thick with the smell of smoke and hate. Silas dismounted and walked to the porch. His legs felt like lead weights. Mei Lin stepped forward from the shadows. She dropped the broom handle. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably now. "Why did you come?" she whispered. Silas looked at her. He saw a smudge of soot on her beautiful cheek. He saw the tears she had refused to shed. "Because you brought me a pie," he said simply. "For 3 years, no one had knocked on my door simply because they cared. And because you told me a man is measured by his ground, Martha would never have forgiven me if I had ridden away. I'm just holding mine, Mei Lin. It helps us tell more stories about the hidden heroes of history."
I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had a neighbor who became family? Tell me your story. Now, let's see what happened as the sun rose. The next morning revealed a landscape of tragedy.
28 Chinese miners lost their lives during the tragedy.
Many more families were forced to flee. 75 homes had been burned to ash. Many families had fled into the freezing hills. Silas stayed at the laundry until the sun was high.
He helped Mei Lin's father board up the broken windows. He shared a pot of tea in the dim light of the back room. There was no more talk of jokes. There was only the reality of a world that was broken. A week later, Mei Lin appeared at the ranch again. This time, she did not bring a pie. She brought a small bundle of her only belongings. "My father is moving to San Francisco," she said. "He says it is safer for our people there." Silas felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. It was a loneliness deeper than any he had known. "Are you going with him?" he asked. He tried to keep his voice from trembling. Mei Lin looked at the mountains. The first snow of the season had dusted the peaks. "I told him I would think about it," she replied. She looked at Silas. The age between them was like a wide, rushing river, but the bridge they had built was made of stone. Silas took a deep, shaky breath. The joke he had made didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt like his last chance at life. "Mei Lin, I am an old man with a drafty house," he said. "I have a stubborn heart and a tired soul. I have nothing to offer but a name that people respect. I don't want to spend the years I have left eating supper alone. I've buried enough silence for one lifetime. Every morning I still wake up expecting to hear another pair of footsteps. The silence is heavier than these mountains. I have a roof that doesn't leak and a fire that stays lit. But if you stay, you will never stand alone again." He reached out his scarred hand. It was the greatest gamble of his life. The town would whisper for years. He no longer cared. Mei Lin looked at his hand. She looked at the scars and the strength in his fingers. She reached out and placed her hand in his. She visited every week that autumn. Sometimes she brought tea. Sometimes he repaired things around her father's shop. Neither of them called it courtship, but everyone could see it, not because he was afraid, because he never believed life would give him another chance. The warmth was immediate. "I think I would like to see the garden in the spring," she said. They were married in October. The golden leaves were falling like rain. The ceremony was small and quiet. The preacher looked confused. The neighbors whispered behind their hands in the pews. But Silas Vance did not care about the whispers. He walked into the church with Mei Lin on his arm. She wore her plum silk dress. He wore his best black coat. Silas's hands trembled as he slipped the ring onto hers. They lived on that ranch for 20 more years. Mei Lin turned the quiet house into a sanctuary. She filled it with the scent of ginger and star anise. She brought laughter back to the hollow halls. He taught her how to ride a horse through a blizzard. She taught him that his heart was not a fortress. They faced the stairs of the town together. They faced the lean years side by side. Silas realized his joke was the truest thing he ever said. He wasn't 20 years younger in his bones, but he felt younger in his spirit than he ever had. Love did not care about the date on a birth certificate. It did not care about the color of a person's skin. It only cared about the heart willing to stand its ground. On his 80th birthday, Silas sat on the porch. Mei Lin sat beside him. Her hair was now a beautiful river of silver. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you remember the pie?" she asked softly. Silas smiled and squeezed her hand. "I remember the joke," he said. Mei Lin laughed. It was the sound of 20 years of happiness. "It wasn't a joke, Silas. It was an invitation to live." The sun dipped below the mountains. The sky turned to shades of purple and gold. They sat in the silence, a husband and a wife who had survived the storms. They were a testament to the power of kindness. They proved that love is the strongest force on earth. If you felt the warmth of this story, please share it. Pass it to a friend who needs a new beginning. Your support keeps these stories of the heart alive. May God bless you and your families. May you always find a reason to hold your ground.
In our next video, we explore a new frontier mystery.
If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing. Every week we share true-to-the-heart Western romances about courage, kindness, and second chances. And perhaps the next story will become your favorite.